Now this video will be showcasing some painfully bronze level gameplay, and I'm going to be trying to hide the names of the players in here so nobody gets embarrassed, but unfortunately some people will still try to find them anyway, so I'm just doing my best. The purpose of this video is not to insult or put down anyone, but to use it as an educational tool. Now, without sugarcoating it, a lot of lower division players are just bad. A long time ago, when I was ranking up a few Smurfs, I detailed my adventures through all the divisions. Bronze was obviously the worst, where you can pretty much feed off of everyone and only few teams were uncarryable. Silver was a bit better, but you could start noticing great mechanics here, but absolutely awful decision making still was prevalent. Gold is where players start getting much better, but are ultimately unrefined and prone to making repeated mistakes and not learning from them. I bring this up because I was playing with a few literal bronze players the other day, and the same mistakes kept rearing their ugly heads with each team. I know it sounds pretty cliche, but plenty of bronze players actually do repeat the same problems and showcase that this is pretty damn systemic. Even I was surprised to see that these patterns play out over and over, and I just really want to point them out and talk about them. Keep in mind that some of these issues are also prevalent in higher divisions, but the degree is far less in comparison to the lowest of divisions. Also keep in mind that this is more focused on the mental and strategy aspects, since mechanical skill is a whole different spectrum. This is also focused only on the players who play to win in ranked and leave bronze, but hold themselves back, and does not focus on the players who do otherwise, like play casually with friends. Also, I may showcase the same footage repeatedly, as more than several mistakes happen in the same scenes for a few of them. The first one to bring up is the painful and detrimental lack of awareness. It's not even just lacking awareness, but the whole package of tunnel vision and freezing up during a situation. I have seen plenty of players just ignore their own wards and die when someone shows up. They commit to some big play when the situation around them has quickly turned against them and made that play obviously terrible. I can't stress this enough. Bronze players in general do not pay attention to obvious signals, and they end up being caught off guard each time, and as a result of their surprise, they just freeze up and make the situation much worse for themselves. This is perhaps one of the harder problems to fix for anyone, since I've seen it in much higher divisions as well. Frankly put, it's the players simply being lazy and not attentive. They're not paying attention to the game and are distracting themselves with unrelated things, and ultimately causing themselves to miss actual crucial details and make awful decisions as a result. I'm going to put two and two together for this one. Another thing I notice bronze players do a lot is talk way too much nonsense. They talk in all chat about the reasons they failed to win the fight they were in, talk to the team some pointless gibberish, and in general panic. I had a friend who was the definition of bronze, and I managed to help her get to gold by simply fixing this issue. She had the mechanics but kept holding herself back because she cared way too much about what others thought. If she failed a fight or a gank, she'd flip out and say something like, "Man, if my ignite ticked another second," and so on. It made me think that she was so focused on looking good that she wasted so much time worrying about it and ended up missing a lot of advantageous opportunities. Frankly put, half the shit that kills bronze players could have easily been telegraphed and prepared for. Anyhow, this one was important to start with because it will feed into the rest of the crippling problems bronze players have. I don't really have a word for this one, but I'm referring to it as acting absolutely, which means they take the most drastic approaches and reactions to things. This can range from the simple flashing the second you see someone, initiating on the first target you see, or burning everything on a single target. In essence, it means being flat out awful and managing your resources. This goes hand in hand with the awareness problem I mentioned, because I figure these are usually a response to adrenaline and surprise. This whole tunnel vision of, "Oh no, X is here, I must now react or suffer," that is as clear as I can possibly put it. You've seen top tier players who hold on to their flashes to the last second, who continue to fight even in a dire situation and patiently wait to use their abilities rather than burning them all at once. They familiarize themselves with the situation so they can respond to them properly and burn only the amount of resources that is actually required. Once more, the only solution for bronze players is to familiarize themselves with the numbers and values associated with each thing they come equipped with and what their teammates and opponents can do. It is easier said than done, of course, but even just understanding it a little can give them the edge over their division colleagues. Those learning to do this need to start looking beyond the resources as its own and look at it in the terms of what it enabled. If you use flash, that means that while it's on cooldown, you have lost your ability to escape, surprise initiate, go over walls, extend your damage in a teamfight, and so on. With that in mind, you can spread this to your teammates and your opponents and start gauging their potential decisions based on their resources. This next one gets me a lot. It is one of my golden rules and I go over it at least once a stream. Never assume your opponents are worse than you and never assume they miss chances you take yourself. Sadly, a lot of bronze players don't understand this and constantly do things that get them killed because they didn't take into account their opponent's ability to make plays or desire to kill them. This literally is solved by showing respect to your opponents and remembering that they are actual human players who can be as good or better than you. If you make a play that you'd punish if you were the enemy, then assume that the enemy can see that play as well, so they'll make that play. Assuming your opponent is bad will result in you making plays based on the best possible outcome rather than the worst. This means that players who do this basically play like they're already winning and will overplay, overcommit, and basically make silly mistakes that could have been avoided with basic caution. I'm hoping you're seeing a bit of a trend here. A lot of these problems are simply stemming from general laziness and carelessness. Winning is not just a matter of wanting to win, but actually doing what is necessary to win. These problems are constantly taking the South Park route of having a 3-step plan and going from step 1 to step 3 and ignoring all of step 2. The next one is aimless decision making. I hate to use this because it has evolved into an insult, but why would you do that is exactly what has to be brought up each time something like this happens. Why would you go into mid lane when there is no considerable farm and 5 people are missing? Some of the responses I've received for a situation like this were I don't know or there is nothing to do, and neither of those are acceptable for someone who wants to get better. When someone says I don't know, it means they have basically shut off their brain either to getting bored or something and are becoming prone to making glaring mistakes. The same goes for the person saying that there is nothing to do. There is always something to do, whether it's clearing wards, farming some camp, or showing presence with someone else. This reeks of impatience, and an impatient person losing it begins to snowball with an avalanche of mistakes. This also ends up being the reason why bronze games tend to last forever. Neither team knows how to close them out, so both teams wander aimlessly at some point, and then games seemingly end by pure accident, usually when one team luckily kills a majority of the enemy team. The solution to this has already been reflected upon in a previous problem, but this is far more problematic as it extends to your team. The only way you can fix this issue is to learn to be a leader and take point. Your team will likely resist, but at the very least they tend to rally around the best player or the one person they haven't assumed is an asshole yet, which also means you should try not to piss off your teammates. Becoming a leader in these divisions is far harder though, as you not only have to know things, but you have to showcase it, and sometimes the only way to showcase this is to have the opportunity pop up when you're able to take advantage of it. Players will rally behind the person who steals a dragon, who stops a counter gank, who gets a triple kill, and basically anything like that. It is definitely harder said than done, but becoming a symbol of being a good player will convince people to actually listen to you. The last one is perhaps the most cliche, but it truly is what holds players back. They suffer from the inability to learn because they simply refuse to, either actively or inactively. Some players understand that they're bad and want to get better, but they simply don't put the effort into becoming better, or they inhibit themselves due to being self-conscious and anxious. Like the friend I mentioned before, she was able to get through this by relaxing and not caring about others as much. Sometimes it takes going back to the basics and starting from scratch rather than trying to build something from the shambles of stuff you've previously tossed about. Now the worst of these though are the players who simply refuse to acknowledge these problems. I mentioned in another video that I had a player in my game literally say they refused to play with me again because I neutrally suggested they buy armor against a Riven who had killed him 2 times already. He raged and said he personally hated me after the game because of that. His mechanics weren't the worst, I had seen this, but his decision making was atrocious, and it leads me to believe that he might be one of those types who makes excuses and refuses to acknowledge the problem at hand. I deal with these people in an absolute way. If I try to give advice and they spit it back at my face, I simply avoid addressing them ever again. They don't want to learn, so I won't waste my time. I told a teammate to avoid fighting because the enemy jungler was beelining towards them and in fact triggered a few wards, but the teammate didn't budge and ended up dying for that. I told them that they should consider my warnings wisely, and I was told to just stop talking. With that said, you just can't help people that are like that. They can hope to rank up with superior mechanics, but they may eventually hit a wall and be unable to climb because they refuse to study and practice anything meaningful. I hope some of you watching have made this conclusion by now, but none of these had anything to do with mechanics. mechanics. This was all purely mental and seemingly stemming from the same core issues. Some of you may judge me by saying you're just looking down on the lobies and that I'm not actually giving any advice on how to improve. Ask yourself this: how do you help someone who continuously makes bad decisions, who seemingly doesn't know what they're doing and refuses to practice? Think of this as if you were in school. You enter a new class and you obviously don't know everything or anything at all about the subject. You learn in the classroom, you practice the knowledge you are learning, and then get ready to apply that on a test. If you picked it up naturally, then you may not even need to study as much or at all, and you can nail that test easily. If you struggled understanding the subject, then you best go over your notes, study and prepare for the test, and perhaps even study beyond what you were taught in the classroom. If you struggled and refused to do anything, then don't be surprised when you actually fail the test. When a person fails a test they didn't study for, you call them lazy. When a person actively refuses to learn, you call them stubborn and stupid. Why can't the same apply for League? Yes, one is real life and the other one is a video game, but the premise of learning is the same. In League, you can gather notes by playing the game and failing, by watching better players perform, by looking up videos, or having a better player tell you. Whose fault is it that you didn't bother to study those notes and then failed when it came time to test yourself? You could give a person all the videos, all the replays, all the resources imaginable in order to improve, but it won't matter if they simply don't do anything with it. The solution to a majority of bronze problems really is just sitting down, putting down some meaningful practice, and putting in some actual effort. Videos like this are made possible by my sponsors, Crunchyroll and Loot Crate. Loot Crate's upcoming April crate contains Harry Potter, Vikings, Labyrinth of the David Bowie kind, and Uncharted stuff. If you're interested in any of those themes and would like to check out the offer, click the link in the description below. Using either service greatly supports my channel and I'll appreciate it tremendously.